heroes and heroism. It was probably a touch of the romantic in you that stirred you to come to this place. Certainly that was so in my case. It's just that we're so ground into egalitarianism today that we're embarrassed to contemplate these chance fires that burn in some people's breasts. People that may turn the tide for you as when you are serving as leaders someday. So it's an information lecture, not a pep talk. Tonight I want to throw self-consciousness and embarrassment to the winds, and for half an hour or so, muse on the history, the literature, yes, the reality, they're there, of heroes. Those who Aristotle described as being the opposite of beasts, one below the normal cut of human, one above. But heroism is an elusive subject, particularly because the hero in times of peril is often a person who theretofore had demonstrated only ordinary competencies. "Hard up the helm," shouted Captain Claret, bursting from his cabin like a ghost in his nightdress as his U.S. Navy frigate, suddenly caught in an unpredictable wind shear off Cape Horn, teetered on the point of capsizing. "Damn you," raged Mad Jack, hard-bitten Mustang lieutenant, officer of the deck. "Hard down, I say, and be damned to you." Contrary orders, but Mad Jack's were obeyed, and the ship was saved. We know this happened because Herman Melville watched this scene on deck that night as a young enlisted U.S. Navy sailor in the 1840s. He later incorporated the incident into a largely autobiographical book, White Jacket. Quoting Melville from said book, "In a sudden gale, or when a large quantity of sail is suddenly to be furled, it is the custom for the first lieutenant to take the con from whoever happens to be the officer of the deck. But Mad Jack had the trumpet that watch, nor did the first lieutenant now seek to wrest it from him. Every eye was upon him, as if we had chosen him among us all to decide the battle with the elements by single combat with the spirit of the Cape. For Mad Jack was the saving genius of the ship, and so proved himself that night." Melville even supplies us with a kind of a coda, a sort of general rule of human behavior with which you may or may not agree. "In times of peril, like the needle to the lodestone, obedience, irrespective of rank, generally flies to him best fitted for command." In telling the story, Melville produces several other eye-opening concepts. Captain Claret was not a neurotic Captain Queeg. He was not an ineffective or spineless person. He performed many command functions well, sometimes rather forwardly, like once ordering a boarding party to invade a Spanish ship in port to arrest and recover his deserted leading petty officer of the foretop, who was ensconced there. Courage in wielding authority from his cabin Claret had. And that which he had might be called moral courage, as Clausewitz defines it. One of two kinds he contrasts in On War. That is, the courage of taking responsibility, as opposed to courage in the presence of danger to the person. It was this second kind of courage that Claret lacked. It was that courage which makes one move easily in the presence of physical danger and chance. Old Prussian Clausewitz said courage in the presence of danger to the person comes from either one, what he calls the permanent condition, proceeding from the organism, what we would call courage in the genes, or two, temporary conditions, positive enthusiasms from such things as pride or patriotism. He prefers the combination of the two. Melville, less analytically, but more functionally, says it this way: "These two orders to the helm, given by the captain and his lieutenant, exactly contrasted their characters. By putting the helm hard up, the captain was for scudding, that is, for flying away from the gale, whereas Mad Jack, with helm down, was for running the ship into its teeth. Scudding makes you a slave to the blast, which drives you headlong before it. But running up into the wind's eye enables you to a degree to hold it at bay. Melville continues, as with ships, so with men. He who turns his back to his foe gives him an advantage. That night, off the pitch of the Cape, Captain Claret was hurried forth, says Melville, from his disguises, and at a manhood-testing juncture appeared in his true colors, a thing which every man in the ship had long suspected that night proved true. Manhood-testing juncture. I've got a note to myself on that. Male-dominated language fills this literature on heroism. From the Greeks to Clausewitz to Melville to the old Spanish Ortega y Gasset, about whom we'll talk later. Does my repeating it mean that I do not believe females have heroic instincts, impulses, or capabilities? No, it does not mean that. It's just that if I changed every he in this literature to he or she, the lecture would turn out to be about a different subject. So I beg everybody's pardon and press on. Melville's wind-up of the incident is interesting. He said that to show how, quote, how spontaneous is the instinct of discretion in some minds in such times, that the captain took no action against Mad Jack. Nor, so far as the crew ever knew, did the captain ever even venture to reprimand him for his temerity. Now, the author does not try to define Jack the hero, nor does he feel obliged to list or make analyses of his strengths and virtues like you would go about a problem, you know, an abstract problem. He merely says that he was in the saddle in the ship. To me, that marks the genius of Melville. It took me a long time to give up such tortured justifications and admit that heroes stand on action alone. There he is. You saw it. He actually did it. Long ago and far away, you say. Times have changed. That's what some military experts and some military writers say. John Keegan, British military historian, journalist, and longtime professor at Sandhurst, wrote a book about being fitted for command a few years ago. Its title was a good one, The Mask of Command, which we all wear. The Mask of Command. He made the excellent point that throughout history, at least since the time of Alexander the Great, all good combat leaders have labored under the same 5 imperatives, vis-a-vis the men, that word again, the men they lead. They are imperatives of kinship, taking care never to leave any doubt in the minds of your men that you and they are, in the last analysis, comrades in arms. Prescription, having a personal authoritative style of laying down rules and direction. 3, sanction, being perceived as a person who has and follows some cogent theory of reward and punishment. 4, action, being able to show your men that, yes, you do know how to fight. And 5th, example, showing by your every move and whole being that you subscribe to the principle that those who impose risk should be seen to share it. Keegan concentrated the book on the last imperative, and he called it heroism. And after an enlightening and thorough review of exactly how Alexander the Great and the Duke of Wellington and U.S. Grant and others each handled themselves in battle, in what patterns they rode or paced during the heavy fighting, how close to the approaching lines they came, what personal mannerisms seemed natural to them as they showed their mettle, dodging bullets or spears while keeping track of the state of play at the same time. Then he tacked on a chapter at the end about modern times. And there, in so many words, told us that as of right now, 1987 then, example, heroism, as he dubbed it, had to go. That in the